right, let's get Hembo on the line here. We've got Hembo. Good morning, sir. Sorry about the little confusion, but good to have you. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Invite you guys to a fabulous show. I'm happy to be a part of it today. How's it going?
Well, it's going great. I thought maybe we want to ask you about Cal and we want to ask you about Munoz and some of the other stuff you've been talking about recently. But for those who aren't as familiar, could you kind of give your story a little bit of kind of who you are and how you got going with Greeny and with Buster, et cetera?
Sure thing. I'll give you the elevator pitch. So I've been at ESPN for more than 10 years now, and not soon after I arrived, it became fairly obvious fairly quickly that my passion for baseball was going to enable me to have opportunities that I only dreamed of when I was younger, as you might imagine. So I've been on the pod with Buster for 7-8 years now, and originally linked up with Greeny back in the Mike and Mike days. And as you now know, I produce Get Up, which is our morning television show, and have since the day that it launched in 2018. But I'll be honest with you, I'm just a baseball knower, a baseball lover, and for as much football as we talk, for as much NBA as we talk, baseball is my love, first, last, and always. And so I always appreciate the fact that you guys amplify my stuff, and love digging into some Mariners today. I'd imagine that you guys are you're immersed in a pretty fun season, and this is my way of saying I don't really want to talk about myself that much more. So I'll rely on you to provide your listeners my bona fides. But honestly, I just want to talk ball and not talk Hembo.
Have we crossed paths, Hembo, when you were taping a Buster podcast back in the day before I left to jump to Fox? Did we ever share studio space together back there in Bristol?
I don't believe so, because I think if we had, you very likely would not have invited me on this show, because I'm sure you would have had a negative experience.
Gotcha.
But our paths may have crossed in terms of timeline, but I don't know that we've ever, aside from maybe Two Ships in the Night and the ESPN Pass, legendarily, aside from that, I don't believe so. I could be mistaken, though.
So how good is Cal?
He is absolutely phenomenal. There is no question in my mind that you are watching every single night the best catcher on earth. I think that is clear and obvious at this point. I want to say coming into the season, I do these top 10 rankings every year in the offseason with Buster, and I want to say I still had Cal third behind William Contreras and Adley Rutschman, and right now he's twice the player that they are, even combined. He's phenomenal. There are very few catchers that I've ever seen that have the ability to impact winning in multiple ways the way that he is right now. Now, that's not to suggest that he's going to necessarily triple the production that we've seen from the first third of the season, but candidly, he doesn't even have to. If Cal Raleigh merely plays the back of his baseball card the rest of the season, the head start that he has provided himself provides him a really good chance to be an MVP finalist and to be considered clearly and obviously the best catcher in the game. I think the reason why the national perception of him is not yet to this point, aside from us, of course, not watching him every day the way that you do, is because he's so brilliant, it's boring. There are certain catchers who, pop off the page when it comes to their StatCast metrics. There are certain catchers whom we love because they have the 1-8 pop time consistently, and they might look a little bit more flashy or brilliant. Cal Raleigh is kind of boring, but it's brilliant. That's the kind of baseball player that I like. I'm going to play 162 times, by the way, something that no catcher does, and I'm going to bang, and behind the plate, I'm going to manage a pitching staff really effectively because I can block it, I can frame it, and these guys have built up a good relationship with me over the years, and that to me is one way in which Cal Raleigh's impact value cannot be captured in WAR. WAR is simply put not a satisfactory calculation when it comes to the impact of him and other catchers like him. Yadier Molina is another really good, somewhat recent example. And Cal Raleigh right now is a better hitter than he ever was. And so I think you're looking at a player who I think conservatively we can say right now is the best catcher on earth, clearly and obviously, and on this current trajectory is going to be a finalist for the MVP. Unfortunately, Aaron Judge is acting like Babe Ruth at the moment.
Compare and contrast him to Salvador Perez.
So without destroying Salvador Perez, who might be putting the finishing touches on a career worthy of Hall of Fame consideration, truthfully, there is no comparison. Cal Raleigh at his peak, which right now he is immersed in, is a demonstrably better baseball player than Salvador Perez was. And that's not my opinion. It's a statement of fact, because Salvador Perez was never close to the defender when it comes to the all-encompassing nature of his game as Cal Raleigh is right now, nor was Salvador Perez at the apex of his powers from an offensive standpoint catching every single day. The year in which he broke the single-season catcher home run record, he didn't catch nearly close to every day. I think he caught like somewhere between 110 and 120 times that season. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, which is probably stunning for you to hear me say. But look, Cal Raleigh's going to catch 120 times this year. He's going to play 160 times, and that's the big difference. The thing that we do, I think, nefariously, erroneously, is we look at a player's production in totality and they say, oh, yeah, they're a primary catcher, which means you got to play 81 times there. But, guys, you know as well as I do, the taxing nature of that position means if you're producing in the games in which you're playing there and not merely in the games where you're also DHing, which, of course, was a huge part of Salvador Perez's record-breaking season. And that is the genius of Cal Raleigh. The fact that he's doing this behind the plate and he's doing it 4 out of 5 nights. That's the genius. When you look at the course of baseball history, some of the greats, they're the ones that were behind the plate every single time in which they played. And that, to me, is what Cal Raleigh's doing. He's not a bat who's masquerading as a catcher half the time. No, he's a catcher who's masquerading as one of the best hitters on earth right now.
You know, it's funny, Hembo, because you bring that up, and in a lot of ways I get it. It's a positive. And by the way, oddly, his numbers as a DH are not good. Like he's like Samson with his haircut. I mean, like his whole game does not seem to translate, at least this year, as a DH. But while I agree that is more impressive, is it the best thing for the team for him to catch and play that often? You know, you look at I've just spent a few minutes looking at some of the numbers of great catchers over the years, and their September numbers do tend to drop. Should they be playing him that often or not?
I think they should be, because I think he's capable of it. Every player has, as you well know, various degrees of bandwidth. Maybe the reason why the Royals decided to deploy Salvador Perez that way is because he didn't have the fortitude. He did not have the bandwidth to do it as often as Cal Raleigh is doing it. Any number of other examples we would provide ourselves throughout the course of baseball history. But this guy is a little bit different. He's built differently, best I can tell. And look, maybe in September, I'm going to look like an idiot because maybe his production tails off. But there's also no obvious way that we can know in which his production, which perhaps might tail off, is in any way dovetailed to the fact that he's catching so frequently now. There are any number of variables and so few constants that we can point to if and when that happens. I think value is produced on a daily basis, and what makes him so valuable is the boring, is the repetitive. My favorite record in the history of baseball is 26-32. It's Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive game streak. The enormous value that he provides is the fact that every single day you know where he's going to be. And that enables your manager to have so much more flexibility because you're making 8 decisions instead of 9. And so perhaps I'm wrong about this, but I think one way in which we can provide value to the team on a daily basis is that consistency, is that monotony. And that's exactly what Cal Raleigh does every single day.
Wow, look at this guy. You just wind him up, Salk, and he just goes. He loves his baseball.
In fairness, I have a workout plan for right after this, and as you can probably tell, I already took my free, and so I probably should have done that after our call.
Is Hembo Greek? Are you Greek?
I'm Greek, yeah, man.
The Greek,
man. Hembekides. Anytime you get a 10-letter ES ending and there's a K mixed in, it's a dead giveaway.
I figured it. I just didn't want to assume. Yeah. I mean, you're the Greek freak of baseball. He is Hembo. So let me just tee you up on another guy. There's 10 minutes on Cal. How about Andres Munoz and what he's done to begin this season?
The best closer in baseball. I mean, the pitch mix is filthy. When you're running it basically 2 feet arm side on your two-seamer, and then you're breaking it, you know, 1.5 feet vertically to your glove side, it puts hitters in such a challenging bind. And the way in which he tunnels his pitches at the bottom half of the zone makes it so challenging to square up, because whatever contact you can create, even if it's hard contact, you're just driving that baseball straight into the ground. And the way that I put it on Buster's podcast a couple weeks back, again, the monotony of the season, the consistent nature of pitchers, of position players. You're playing an 8-inning game right now with Andres Munoz as your closer, and that's enormously valuable because it enables every single one of your other relief pitchers to play up. You know, there's this notion when it comes to starting pitchers and how you deploy them that every inning they can provide you throughout the course of a season improves your bullpen ERA at least by a little bit the next day, and even more the day after that. And the way that Andres Munoz can be deployed is that in reverse, because what you're doing is you're working backwards rather than how can I get to the ninth inning? No, how can I get to the eighth? Because you know what your ninth inning is going to look like, and you very likely know that he's going to put up zeros. The fact that he's willing to and able to in the offseason deploy new pitches and experiment with his craft demonstrates to me that he has an enormous amount of aptitude, and that's so impressive because we see so many pitchers max out, and then they say, okay, once the league has adjusted back to me, then it's just my good versus your good, and very often that's how relievers and their volatility will tail off over the course of time. But the fact that he has the ability to adjust back, that shows enormous maturity from someone whose stuff is just diabolical.
Yeah,
so, look, at some point he's going to give up a couple runs, but in a playoff context, I can't imagine handing the ball to anybody and feeling more confident than I would in Andres Munoz this season.
Yeah, it's funny. He's been hurt, and so he's not all the way back yet, but when healthy, you can make an argument anyway that Brash has even better stuff than Munoz.
Yeah. That's I think the best kept secret right now about the Mariners is that the thing that we thought for sure we knew was that it was going to be an outstanding pitching staff is not the case so far, and yet you're still 6 games over. And that's why you should feel and your fans should feel so incredibly optimistic, because some of your highest powered arms right now are on the shelf, and you're still managing to tread water. And that ultimately, as you well know, is a sign of a great team. It's not how good is your good. It's how good is your bad. How good is your ordinary? How good are you when you don't have every person rowing in the same direction? And right now, the Mariners are generally speaking, managing to tread water despite that injury, despite the Logan Gilbert setback. And most teams could not absorb the kind of injuries like this. One of your best starters, one of your best relievers all at once. But they've done a good enough job at stacking high volume of good enough, average to good players, and over the course of 162, that enables your roster to play up.
So it's funny, you bring up sort of how good is your bad, and that's been some of the conversation about Julio this year, that his slow start has not been as slow as it's been at times in the past. But, still just waiting for that superstar player to emerge. Do you have a feeling or a comp on who Julio is?
I don't have a top-of-head comp, but I do have a strong feeling, and that feeling is that he is either being instructed to hit incorrectly or he's not adhering to advice that he's currently getting from Edgar Martinez and the rest of the staff. And I want to make it clear, you're much closer to it than I am. I'm seeing this from the opposite coast many times the day after, seeing highlights, watching swings, looking at stats. But there is no reason why that guy should not be a way better hitter. You know it. I know it, and we know for sure that he's able to accumulate WAR because the legs are so good, because the glove is so good. And so the floor is a 5 or 6 WAR player. But we know the reason we dream on him is because the ceiling's an 8 or 10 WAR player. And there's no obvious reason to believe, based on the bat speed and based on any of the other sort of go nuclear times that we've seen him go on, that he can't put it together. But when I say that he's either not adhering to coaching or they're coaching the wrong things, is because it's very clear based on the numbers that he is timing the fastball to go to right center and timing the breaking ball to yank it. And that is without casting aspersions, is an elementary way of approaching hitting for a player of his stature. What Julio Rodriguez should be doing is, for lack of a better term, positioning his barrel based upon the pitch location and not the pitch height. What he's doing is for lack of a better term, imagine 2 pitches going exactly down the middle. The first is a fastball. His timing is such where he's hitting that ball into the ground because it's beating him to the spot, for lack of a better term. The same pitch, a breaking ball, he's pulling that pitch. And the reason why that's an ineffective strategy for Julio Rodriguez is because the pull side power is so enormous, and when he can get on plane with fastballs to the pull side, he's one of the best hitters on the planet. He's just not doing it hardly at all. So even if you don't even take into account his chasing nature, his swing decisions, it needs to be a location-driven swing and not a pitch-type-driven swing. And perhaps the reason he does it this way is because he doesn't have good pitch recognition, and that could be something that they could work on him throughout the course of time. But all the metrics suggest he should be way better, and what the numbers say to me is that the way in which he attacks the baseball is backwards. He needs to be aiming for location and not for pitch type.
What did you say your pre-workout mix is?
I think this is some C4. And right now look. I mean, who among us hasn't spoken about the way that Julio Rodriguez goes to his pull side and had the hair on the back of our necks stand up from time to time.
I got a text here that says, awesome interview so far, guys. Make it a policy that all of your guests take a pre-workout before coming on. We may get more of this before it's said and done.
Okay, so last thing for me, Hembo. What do you want to see the Mariners do over the next 30 to 50 days? Right, half game up in the American League West, as you said, kind of treading some water, and then some have done some really great things individually. What would you like them to do over the next, 30 to 50 days to get us back into these playoffs and become possibly a World Series contender?
I would like to see them add an infielder. I just don't think the present construction of the lineup, specifically the infield, is satisfactory enough. There are too many easy outs in the bottom third of the order. I think they do need one more professional hitter, and I think that's going to have to come via the trade market. The good thing is that, as you well know, your system's loaded, freaking loaded. And so you actually have the ability to trade from the depth of your minor league system. And even if that means you're punting on service time and years of control for a rental, you can afford to do it. The two names that I wrote down in advance of our conversation today are Brandon Lau of the Rays. You guys obviously consummated that trade for Arozarena last year, so the relationship is there. He's mashing. He can play multiple positions in the infield. Big-time lefty power bat. And the second name I wrote down is Bo Bichette, obviously a very different kind of player, someone who you could probably play a second or a third if you needed to, of course, in a pinch, and is a much more of a opposite field hit-for-contact type guy. And even though both players are rentals, in my judgment, you don't really want to trade for somebody with a bunch of years of control, given the fact that there are so many studs that play the infield in your system. And so from the perspective of looking long term, like the last thing that I would want to do would be to block those guys. The last thing I want to do is acquire an infielder with a bunch of years left on his contract, for lack of a better term. And so I think Bo Bichette, again, just as examples, as proxies, and Brandon Lau are both examples of players that I think the Mariners could add, coupled with the inevitability of the return of some of these pitchers we've discussed, I think put you in pole position to win the American League West.
I like those names. Lau was on my list today as well. Bichette's always been on my list, but I just never been 100% convinced they'll trade him. A couple others, I'm curious if you like any of these names for the Mariners, because I think they could also have a little flexibility in the outfield as well. Cedric Mullins, Ryan O'Hearn, Rhys Hoskins, if Milwaukee were to fall out. I even brought up Isaiah Kiner-Falefa as a possibility in the infield. Any of those jump out to you?
Yes, I mean, any and all. It's going to come down to how from the perspective of prospects capital, how far Jerry Dipoto is willing to go. Also, just demonstrated by the fact that we've just rifled off a bunch of names here. It's going to be the market for position players on the move is going to be glutty. It's going to be vast and wide. It's going to be pitchers that are going to be more difficult to obtain, which is why I think that Baltimore is a fairly interesting potential trade partner, because Felix Bautista would look awfully good in the back of a bullpen with Andres Munoz. And I can imagine consummating a deal in which you acquire one bat and him on the back end of your bullpen, and all of a sudden you've improved your team in multiple ways considerably. And so I'm just throwing this at, I don't know if you guys, how wrongly you feel, pardon my ignorance, about potentially moving Harry Ford, considering Cal Raleigh's banging and Cal Raleigh's locked up to a long-term deal. But that's the kind of package for which I would be willing to move Harry Ford, because if you have the ability to improve your team in multiple ways in one trade, all of a sudden, now I'm willing to move a top 100 prospect.
It's great stuff. People wondering if C4 stands for coffee, caffeine, and crack cocaine. I don't think so. No, it's just a little more natural than that, I think. But I'm not necessarily the expert on that. Hembo.
Look, you're the Pacific Northwest guys. That's your milieu. That's not mine.
Exactly right. All right, man. Hey, appreciate it. This was great. Please, let's do it again. Love all of your stuff on the Mariners, and keep tagging us in it, because it's fun to share it, and it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, boys. I'm going to go work out now.
All right, there you go. There's Hembo, Brock. That was fun.
Please.